A Build Hatch developed production.
Hello, I'm Aaron Kyle and welcome to another episode of Build Hatch. On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I had an opportunity to sit down and hear another perspective on our show. I always like to hear a variety of perspectives from everyone and anyone in the building, construction and property industry. So this was a really insightful chat with Mark Kentwell, Principal of PRD Real Estate in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie. I often talk about the level of training and career development that goes on in the real estate side of business. So this was a really interesting and certainly energetic chat, so let's get into it. Okay, Mark Kentwell from PRD Nationwide Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thank you very much. We're going to be hatching some awesome sort of ideas into possibly systems and expansion and value here, hopefully.
Yeah, look, I've known you for a long time, and full disclosure, we've done some property deals in the past, so we have a bit of a history together and an existing relationship. But I'm really looking forward to this episode because one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to a real estate agent, and not just any real estate agent, a very practical, pragmatic real estate agent, someone that people can relate to in the building and construction side of things. Mm-hmm. Now, before we talk about that, we always like to go back to our guest's history, how they got into the building or construction or property industry in your case. So take us back to the beginning.
Yeah, so my parents started in very humble beginnings and used, I suppose, moving around for job opportunities as a very good way of getting ahead. My mum was out in the workforce, sort of 14. My dad, about the same. Mum moved out of home because her dad was travelling with the army. He'd been to Vietnam a couple of times and they were moving from base to base. She chose to stay in Sydney. And that's when Mum and Dad met. This was before I was alive, but hearing their history of working in their various industries and sort of climbing and getting better and systems and process and people, I was hearing a lot of that talk from an early age. And what I didn't realise was how many times they'd moved around as well just to get us to where I was when I was really taking stock of what was going on. So I can remember back to when I was sort of 2 or earlier, but I started becoming aware at sort of around 9 or 10 years of age that we were moving a lot and they were buying and selling each time. And they weren't making a hell of a lot out of each deal, but it was definitely enough to fund our lifestyle, fund school fees, get through the recession that we had to have in the Keating era when it was sort of up to 19% interest rates. And I learned a lot about the property from a consumer side, from an owner's side, and I learned a lot about real estate agents from that side. I was sort of quite technically minded at school. I got ducks to the school in year 6 and then equal ducks in year 10, which was much of the dismay of the teachers and everyone around me because I wouldn't say a naughty kid, but I was definitely a cheeky kid. So I wouldn't say naughty, but it probably means naughty.
Highly functioning, I think. So
highly functioning. I was definitely on a higher plane of my interpretation of some of the guidelines. But yeah, I really enjoyed school. I was very social. I moved around to a lot of different schools. And I suppose where this is getting to is that at school, I had a natural inclination towards business, economics, legal, and that came from commerce, which was my sort of early high school subjects. But I was crafty at the sciences and the maths. So I did engineering science, 3-unit maths, woodwork, stuff like that. I was into motorbikes. That was my first buying and selling motorbikes, renovating them. But at school, I just, I couldn't see myself getting through another 5 years of uni when I finished, when I was looking at some of the engineering professions, architecture. I really liked business, but I couldn't figure out how a degree really applied to that. So I decided to go for apprenticeships at the end of year 10. I failed an eyesight test for that. I should have actually realised that I was actually under the blindness threshold for driving. I went for them again in year 11 and I got 5 out of 5 apprenticeships I went for, and I went for the one with the highest degree of education and highest degree of pay, which was the mining industry, coming from Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, living at Maitland at that time. So I took up a role in Western Lake Macquarie. I'd grown up a big chunk of my life on Eastern Lake Macquarie and I was stoked. I was working at Macca's at the time, so I understood business and systems. I was in bands, I was buying and selling motorbikes, I was very entrepreneurial, but I took the job in the mines for the money, really. And during that time, I became a tradesperson as an electrical fitter and industrial electrician. I went on to do electrical engineering in high tension switching and electronics, and then I also did a trade in mechanical site. So I did a fitter, underground fitter, industrial fitter machinist, and then I went on and did mechanical engineering as well. So all the material sciences, I was starting to do CAD and a couple of other things there. And I was really heading down that path, and I was making really good coin as a youngster. I was like in my early 20s, and like it's crazy money when you think about it. I look at how hard some of the people work in various roles, and to get to 140, 150K income is a lot of work. And
working a couple of long hours, but a couple of days a week.
Yeah, it was 4 days on, 3 days off, and so I was doing that. I had bought my first property at 19, and it was a good time because at that age, and it was around 2000, 2001. We got tailwinds of the market coming off the back of a recession. They used property incentives to stimulate the economy again. And then I got my second property like 2021. I had shares, I had utes, I had cars and dirt bikes and drum kits and
all the toys.
Yeah, but I wasn't actually fulfilled with the career. I noticed then in mining, the way to get ahead was to wait for someone to retire, to wait for someone to pass away, unfortunately, or, it was last to come first to leave in the unionist sort of movement that it was on at the time. It was becoming privatised. They were favouring younger workers, but there was no way to really exponentially grow if you applied a certain craft. It was all about doing it the same way over and over again, and you were just basically replacing a machine to a large extent. I was fault finding. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed fixing stuff. I remember a longwall situation where the mine was like $110,000 an hour when it was down, and I saved what looked like a 5-day breakdown. We got it sorted about 6 hours, and I got a pat on the back for that. But I wasn't all after the acknowledgement. I was after the personal feeling of growth, and I'd stopped feeling that in the mines. Where I started picking it up was I was in a band at the time. I'd gone from punk music into Aussie hip hop. It was kind of getting tailwinds of its own. It was around the Hilltop Hoods coming out, and I was managing our little band and managing a few events. And I really liked it that I found a way to get more people onto a mailing list, found a way to get more people into venues, found a way to make the publican make some money instead of just paying it all out in ticket prices and advertising.
So in amongst all that, there's a lot of thinking outside the box.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, not following standard protocols.
I was looking for a gap.
Challenging opportunities.
Yes, yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I was looking for a gap. I was looking for how do we optimise this? Because obviously do the same thing over and over again, and you're not going to really expect different results unless you're under the definition of insanity. So that gave me a taste, but I was in the wrong scene. The music scene in Australia is struggling. The hip-hop scene in particular, the culture is all about the struggle. It's not like in America where it's the ascension out of the projects. I wasn't in the projects, but even the guys that were doing well in hip-hop, it was all about how long they'd been around. So my partner at the time was on the front desk of a large real estate agency as a receptionist, and she wanted to become an agent. I went and did the course to keep her company. So I went and did that. I was 21 and 22, and I went and did that course. At the time, I'd just injured myself in a motorbike accident on a road, and my knee was taking a while to heal, and I was noticing there was a few guys injured, but from work. And it was really having me think about what longevity was in the industry. And I've got nothing against people getting ahead with the mining industry, but I'm much more probably into renewables now than I am into that industry, and that's another topic. But I could see that my lifespan there wasn't going to be long because my fulfillment factor was low. I really enjoyed the course at real estate more than any engineering course I had done, and the teacher actually thought that I was already in a firm. She didn't realise I wasn't working with my partner. My dad had turned his hand to industrial not long prior, coming out of oil industry into food, service industry, distribution. He got into sort of development for a short while, and that transited him across to industrial in a very small firm. And so I had a conversation with him around the dinner table, as we did about once a week when we caught up. And I said, look, I'm really into this real estate thing. They're offering voluntary redundancies in the mines. I'd like to take one at age 22, and I'd like to go into business with your dad. So I went in as 50%, him and Mum were the other 50%. Mum was in a corporate career doing very well, a national or international role at the time, and she'd climbed her way up working very hard. So she was like Dad and Mum's security. I had a property that I traded, kept one and kept some shares, and we got into it. So I was 22 or 23 when we opened, and we chose PRD because it was a project-savvy brand that also did commercial and resi. They had been founded by developers, Gordon and Archie Douglas, who are still around today, but they're in their late 70s now. They've had the halcyon retirement model, very, very successful retirement model, one of the best in Australia. They developed pretty much 80+% of the Gold Coast they've had their hand in, either as developers, as agents, as research, as mezzanine lending. And I got to meet them at the start. They kind of questioned us. They could see that there was a spark there. They could see Newcastle had some potential. And they encouraged us to dive in, and they encouraged me to get into projects early. So I really made it my craft to understand the whole project process. I got some great mentors. Curtis Field was one of them, who was at PRD that then became Colliers, and now he's at A1, big developer in Sydney, through himself and Christy Leet in Whit Sundays, Bruce Goddard, who's now Place Projects in Brisbane. The list goes on, but Gordon and Archie really got that fire started. There wasn't a lot of projects getting off the ground in Newcastle at the time. Most of them were getting crushed. The market had sort of topped out at 2004. 2005 had gone on the nose, and Newcastle was like, post BHP.
Dirty coal town.
It was just a coal town. Dave Jones were looking at closing. The mall was dying off. The shopping centres were being built out of the CBD. Lots of financing was falling over. Developers weren't getting a start. So I pitched on 3 or 4 projects. I think one of them went ahead and it ended up totally stuffed up and ended up in receivership a few years later. And I wasn't on that one, luckily. But what I learned about the development world was about the importance of getting involved early in the design, in the site acquisition, and the relationship. So I went out and got into residential. I did resi, Dad did commercial. I did a bit of commercial at the start, whatever it took to pay the bills. And I grew a big residential brand because I knew off the back of a big resi brand, we'd be perfectly positioned for projects when the next swing came around, which was about 2012, 2013, when Newcastle got some real government investment. There was a big political change in Newcastle. The government went from a very safe Labor seat to Liberal in every seat in state, not in federal, but state and local. And whilst they end up out a bit later, those changes that were taking place then, along with a few other things, and I'm not getting political here, but there was change. There was change in the air.
And you could see the potential back then, obviously. So
yeah,
you were kind of gearing up, ready for a bit of a shift. And back then, is it fair to say it was a fairly traditional real estate model?
Yeah, the whole Newcastle real estate market was very traditional. So I suppose just to help put some context around this for your listeners, and congratulations on a great podcast and a great sort of avenue that you're running here, Aaron, too, because I've known you as a builder that was in the mines, and I've met you through residential real estate, to then going into development, to then becoming a lawyer in construction with a specialty, to then now doing what you're doing and really getting to a wider audience. I'm inspired by it, mate, even though we're running parallel, So I think it's great, and I like to put context around everything. So, and I'm speaking fast here, so you don't have to change the listening speed. I listen to mine at 2.0, so you can slow me down if you want.
Yeah, I'm the same.
We're getting more in. So the context of this is I'm an entrepreneur first. Business is, I suppose, the world or the sandpit that a lot of entrepreneurs play in, which is where I play. I'm not putting rockets on Mars or anything like that, which I think Elon's amazing for doing it, but I'm playing in the business arena, and the vehicle I'm driving is real estate at the moment, but realistically it's the property sector. So I've been integrated up, down and sideways in so many fields affiliated, and I suppose the thrust of today is building, but I believe that there is an entrepreneurial process that can be applied to the linkages between all of the affiliated sectors. And by doing that, it's good to understand, I suppose, when Seth Godin talks about the 2 types of business people, there's freelancers and there's entrepreneurs. So the freelancer, it's not like an out-of-work journo that's got pizza on his floor and, an old shirt that he hasn't changed in a week. A freelancer can be a highly crafted technician, like the best heart surgeons, brain surgeons, they're freelancers. The best public speaker, Seth Godin himself, calls himself a freelancer. So you've got a particular craft that only you can do. And a lot of builders are like that. You've got these one-person bands, and they have subbies under them, and they do things a very particular way. And the way for them to get ahead is to get better clients or to make more out of one deal. And like, for example, Seth Godin, he has a speaking gig, and like the speaking gig is the person who books it, not each person who buys a ticket. If he does a publishing deal with a book, the 1 million copies he sold isn't 1 million clients, it's one client. So he gets ahead that way, and then you get trailing or royalties off it, but he needs to keep writing books. You can't get someone else to write those books for him. No one's going to take his brain and put it in their head yet. So whereas with the entrepreneur's mindset is look at something from all directions, find a better way of doing it, or a way of doing it that's substantially better, that is gapping the market. So you're finding a gap and you're running at it. And there's a first mover advantage, there's a way you package it up advantage, there's a way you integrate advantage, there's a way you systemize it advantage. But the moment that you have mastered your own system to the point where it's effective and repeatable, you get out of there and you have someone else running it and you move on to the next thing. And if entrepreneurs don't move on, they basically crush their own soul, right? So,
and it's not an easy step to take, is it? Like it's challenging to find someone else to, I guess, overcome that hurdle of putting someone in your shoes. You may have high standards or an extreme work ethic. So it's always a challenge to be able to do that, and it's never perfect, is it?
No, it's not. You've got to be willing to take the imperfections on the way. Like, you look at Google's mantra early on there, like when they were first bringing in some of their sort of KPI metric systems. But before that, like, they even had, like, you know, move fast, break shit was kind of their rule. And then fail faster. And you hear all of these versions of that. Now, the obstacle is the way.
It's changed
and, you
a
know,
lot.
the growth happens outside the comfort zone. And this is also true, because if it's all smooth sailing, you're not actually finding anything that's going to adapt to all systems. It's like the Ford Ranger's becoming the fastest selling dual cab four-wheel drive ute in Australia. And it's manufactured in Australia for Australian conditions, but it's got the look and feel of what Australians want. And it's like, you know, if they weren't putting on a test track in Australian conditions to make it break, they never would have made it what it is. The early versions compared to today are probably totally different. And I'm not even that much of a car buff. I've read this in like 2 or 3 articles when I was looking at them recently. And I think in business, you've got to be willing to put systems in place, have an approach that when the stresses come, you've got a way of dealing with it quickly. And a lot of that's mindset. But I believe in systems, and I learned about this at Macca's, and I've since researched a lot of different systems companies, and I've got a full-time systems implementation specialist in my business now, is that the systems need to be so good that any job in the whole company, bar those that require a freelancer, which is most jobs, can be done by someone else for their first time to 100% accuracy. The only difference is it'll take them longer. So if you haven't got your systems down to the point where it can be described in such graphic detail that someone without experience in that particular job can start that and finish that job without having someone over their shoulder, then the system isn't at that level yet.
It's not good enough.
Yeah, so you can have a great foreman telling you what to do, but what happens when that foreman's crook with really bad, you know, a chronic thing, and they've got to go off work or they're away for a certain period of time? You're then relying on the next best person. And I watch this in building, and it's like, who have you got to replace? Sam. Because Sam's really good. Oh, I've got Luke. Yeah, Luke's pretty good, as long as you can keep him, So it's all about, can you get the human to do something to look like the other human? What about getting the human to carry out a task or a procedure that's down to graphic detail with videos and procedures and where you look for what and what standard you need to adhere to and what checklist you need to perform to and how you charge your phone, like right down to the minimal stuff. And then, you know, the person that comes along, as long as they're accredited from a legislative point of view, they can do the job. And I think building can learn from that, real estate can learn from that, development can learn from that, and then the human side comes in, which is the relationship stuff, the approach, the energy you bring, the enthusiasm, and the vibe attracts your tribe mentality. So I've now got that in my real estate business where if there's a job that's got my name on it, I want to be doing the absolute minimum effective dose of that job, that the client still feels that they've got my oversight and my direction. It's explained up front, but the implementation of the execution team is actually better than me. They're more available. They're doing that job more often. They've got systems and procedures they're working to, because my energy is going to be low if I'm doing that repetitive job, because I'm the entrepreneur. I've got to get on and make a better version. Yes, yeah.
And I think, and we've talked about this before, about dollar productive time. And you talk about it all the time as well, about focusing on what are the activities or the events or the interactions that I can be doing in my business that are actually producing income and revenue.
Yeah. And look, firstly, so if you're looking at it from a real estate agent's point of view, and we're going to tie this into building in a sec, because I definitely want to touch on today the importance of the relationship with builder, developer, architect, engineer, and agent, and where that relationship starts and how you carry it through. But this is all getting back to that, the dollar productive time. So a real estate agent, when they start, let's say they want to go out and sell houses. So they might start in a support role, they might start as a runner, whatever, but eventually they're going to get to a point where they've got the ability to go and find a client, sign a client, manage a client, get market their property, get offers on their property, you know, manage all the other expectations and variables, and get a negotiation underway, and then that deal goes through and it settles. Now, in an agent's day, there's prospecting, there's administration, there's inquiry, and there's influence activity. And the influence activity is like 10% of the total sphere. And the influence activity is the bit you're getting paid for. And it's the bit that only that unique human, that freelancer part of you can do.
So there's this large, heavy, labour-intensive task, and there's 10% of actual influence of actually getting the sale across the line.
Yeah, that's the bit where you get it. If you're going to convince someone to do something, agents think that the inquiry process is convincing. No, it's not. That's service. Prospecting. So agents make lots and lots of calls. They say, I've got to make 100 calls because if I make 100 calls, we've got to get hold of 10 people that might say yes, and then I've got to hold of 10 people that might say yes. I'll get 2, and the rest of them aren't ready yet, and of those 2, I might win 1. So we're going to make 100 calls. So, and then they drop that activity pretty quick. But prospecting, again, like the prospecting doesn't have to be that way. If you're delivering such good results to customers in the marketplace, repeat result and referral is how we get most of our work.
Those key terms that you just mentioned then, that's where I think the building industry can run in parallel. Because you guys spend so much time and resources and energy on training and systems and things like that. We're recording this in a luxury residential apartment complex in Newcastle right now, but maybe builders operating at that level, sure, they have those systems, but for the residential builder that's aspiring to be an architectural award-winning or HIA award-winning builder, that's what they need, those systems that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that it can all be broken down into steps, and the steps can be broken down into what we call tracks or, I suppose, procedures or trails. And from that, those procedures can be broken down into the how. So one of them's the what and one of them's the how. And when you get to the how, it should be to the point where you can push a button, watch a video, you can read it in writing, you can have a checklist, and you've got something to do if you need to go to the next step to tell you how to do the next bit. Prospecting for new work, yeah, there's a level of labour in it, there's a little bit of influence in it, but it's basically identifying opportunities. That'll become a lot easier if you're documenting the process on the way through, you're showing the right audience on the way through. This is where the whole social media and
so how do you do that? At the time of recording this in March, there's no perfect time of, I've just missed 2 weeks of summer Christmas shutdown. I can't put it together, so therefore I have to wait until Christmas next year. That doesn't work. There's no perfect time, is there?
No.
It's now.
Yeah, so it's like there's an old proverb that says, when's the best time to plant an oak tree? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Now.
That's right.
So like we've got my camera guy here, you're doing the audio, and William of No Media started a media company recently with another guy who's a buyer's agent, Jack Henderson Advocacy, who I'm very actively involved in helping scale that business and make sure it integrates right with the selling agency side across Australia because my industry partnerships. And why did I start a media agency? It's because it wasn't practical to keep using another media agency with being subject to all the bookings that go on. It's not fair to get them to be there at the drop of a hat, to change the way that we do it, to change our look and feel. It's not useful for them to be constantly rejigging to suit us, but we've got to move quickly if we want to stay ahead. Efficient, dynamic, adaptable. We need to be able to pivot. So we've got 2 full-time media guys here, plus we've got an editing team that basically work in the cloud, and we've got a 7-day-a-week rotation so that we can have this kind of stuff going on. So there's no reason why a building company, even if they're only a mum and dad operator, they could have a media person, they could be an intern out of uni or whatever, they can come out and once every 2 days, once a week, they could say, so what are we doing on site today? And they interview them. And the builder doesn't even have to be camera savvy. They could be looking into the other direction if they want.
That's right.
Capture the site, get some B-roll, which is basically just footage of the site, put subtitles over it because most people don't actually listen to the audio on social media. Big note there.
Yes.
And make them legible. Cut it down into bite-sized chunks. Watch the responses that you're coming in to see if they like that video at 1 minute or 5 minutes or whatever. Put a YouTube series, a Vimeo series, an IGTV series, a Facebook series, an Instagram series, and whatever else is going on. Now you might say, where do I get time to do this as mum and dad? Like you don't have to be good at the craft to know the craft's important to have. But you've got to invest as if you've already got the money to pay for it, because you're going to be spending money hand over fist, missing jobs. You're going to be spending money on variations.
There's a lost opportunity cost in that for sure.
It's huge, and you've got to invest that opportunity cost. And this is the whole dollar productive time thing. You can't, like people say, I get my partner to do the books, but they're really busy with our 3 kids, and I'm not a detailed person, so I don't do it. So I've got paper invoices still, and I've got this and I've got that, and it's really hard managing all these guys, and they don't turn up to work on time. And I just look at it and I go, look, I feel for you, but like they're the same complaints that have been happening for decades.
Correct.
Like there's now centralized, free, cloud-based calendar systems that work through your mobile phone. You can book it in. The client can book themselves into an appointment when you're available. You don't need a pro to operate it. You don't need your partner to operate it. You can get an offshore person if you want, who are really tech savvy, an onshore person, and a uni person, probably your kid, to do it, right? And getting a better booking system is going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in lost wages of people going backwards and forwards to jobs and not turning up on time, and you're not getting jobs. And they are things that you can change. So the variables can be controlled a lot more than they are. And it's not me telling builders how to do work. These are things I've applied to my businesses.
Yeah, look, as I said, I always like to get the different perspective of all the professional industries. Now, you mentioned earlier about having those early relationships. So that was part of, I guess, wanting to provide people with insight into the benefit of talking to someone like you, having that practical, pragmatic relationship early on in the piece. So tell me how that works with you.
Yeah, so I suppose our business has evolved a lot. Like, I'm sort of involved in over 20 companies now, but the main businesses that I'm involved in selling agency are a project business, which is development of projects, a residential sales business, and a property management business. That's here in this region. And then I back end other businesses, and there's buyer's agency. The buyer's agency and the development business have similar traits, but the key one is that the agent in the development business or the project business or even a residential agent, if they have a developer or a builder that's looking for a site, like there'll be a lot of developers out there right now or builders that would say, I'm after a development site. You get chatting with them in an event or function or whatever, and you go, well, what are you after? Oh, anything as long as there's $1 in it. Now, that's the worst thing in my view that a developer can say to an agent who's trying to find them stock. It's sort of like saying, I want to meet anyone. Well, anyone's no one. Like if I say to you, I'd really like an introduction to the head of the local NIB. I'd like to meet the CEO or someone in the C-suite at NIB. They're in Newcastle. They're down on Honeysuckle. I think he hangs out here. Does anyone know him? Within 3 phone calls, someone will find you that person. If you go, I want to meet someone in business, maybe in the health field, you'll end up with no introductions.
Yeah, that's a lazy outlook.
Yeah, so it's not true that a developer will buy anything with money in it. How much capital have you really got? Because if you've got $500K in the bank and that entitles you to go and buy a site worth sort of somewhere between 800,000 and 1.2 million because you buy the land in a LVR position where the bank's not really going to have much of a handle on what goes on when you put your development on the site, when you put your project on the site, when you find its highest and best use, and then you're going to top that land out later in cash, take the bank out of play, and now start your construction, and then you can have an SPV that holds that construction sort of obligation, and you get your pre-sale target, and you've got your bond to the side. Now, if I'm talking double Dutch, because not everyone's a developer.
SPV, for the people listening to this,
yeah,
SPV.
A special purpose vehicle. Sure. So basically what you're doing is trying to get down towards the path where the Americans have with a limited non-recourse loan. And you can get there if you don't have a high debt position over the land you've got, and then the construction that you're going to do is over a bit of land that doesn't have a mortgage on it, and you're going to build, and you've already made enough sales that the whole development cost is covered in the sales, and you've got 10% deposits in the bank, so they lend you the money to build it, and then when it sells, because you sold it on a single contract, which is part land and part building, then that settlement goes through and it pays out the bank for the construction loan. Correct. And you take your profit. Now, there's going to be lots of consultants coming out there, there's going to be lots of holding costs. This is where the cash position is important. Time. It's and the internal rate of return, where we talk about a development that might have 20% on top of cost, is actually a pretty lean development if it goes for 5 years.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
So 4% per year.
A lot of people forget about that, or they don't calculate that in their numbers.
Exactly. So I like a cash on cash return of about 150% on top of the cash. And if I'm investing in a unit trust, because I've done plenty of developments, right from single house renos right through to whole resorts up in North Queensland, and large-scale apartment developments, fully disclosed, fully on the books. I've done mezzanine lending, I've done land and townhouse. And every time I have a look at one, like I'm looking at the multiple exit strategies, how tied in is the builder to this price, what model are they working on, all this sort of stuff. And I think the developers come before the builder in a lot of situations where the developer wants to buy the site, and then they go and see what they can get on it. So they get a really mud map done by a architect that's not being paid for the work. So they just go, here's the green boxes on the piece of paper. Then they go, I can get this many on it, so I'll pay this price. And they just work out a per box price, and they do a really rough back of the envelope feasibility. The agent goes, yeah, mate, you'll be right. I'll get those prices for you. Not thinking about product mix, finishes, what the competition in the market's like, who your target market's going to be, what the sales appetite's like. And then they go to the builder and they go, I want you to build it for this. And the builder goes, well, this is a complex construction. You've got mines for silence, you've got water, you've got some real access issues here with your craning. We've got to do traffic. We're going to have to get lights up there, roundabout, whatever it might be. We've got issues over a certain height. And and the approval's going to take a while. I can't even give you a firm quote until we've got a CC. So this developer's going, oh shit, well let's just start selling anyway. And then they get the builder and they try to squeeze them until it's an adversarial relationship. And then the builder is under so much pressure. What happens is that they get down to a base point where they can't deliver the service that they would have been able to give at the start. And then they squeeze the agent when they're not getting the sales they want because they've put the price at a point where it's unsustainable. They're insulated by market only if it's going up. But if it's not going up, they're in trouble. And then they value engineer finishes back out of the development, and the buyer ends up with something, and developer and builder and agent, they all look shonky. Now, how could that be prevented? This is that centerpiece thing of getting the core group together. I think builders in particular would really benefit from getting along to the UDIA, New South Wales, Urban Developers Institute. It's a really grassroots organisation. They're across Australia, actually. I got recommended that by Gordon and Archie Douglas really early. And the best thing you can do is get to figure out who's booking the events, who the regional manager is. They're just hardworking local people with some good development knowledge and usually degree qualified, and they know everyone in that chapter.
Great contacts.
Huge contacts. And they want you there. They want you to benefit from it. They're getting speakers in that are speaking at a certain level. There's a lot of networks, there's a lot of clicks, but I think UDIA is the most grassroots one that wants to have you there as a newbie. And they'll introduce you to everyone in the room. You say, I'm a builder. I'd like to meet architects, town players, surveyors, and maybe some commercial and residential real estate agents. But if I could just start with this and this to start with, I'd like to go and talk to them about the product category I represent. And you want to be clear. Are you doing sort of Mac Jones homes? And that's a hard market to break into. Are you doing townhouse developments? Are you doing sort of residential flat buildings? Are you doing big end of town? Are you doing commercial? Whatever you've got, try and meet those people, because they're going to tell you what they need to hear and when they need to hear it, because they want to de-risk it for their clients as well. Nearly all of these advisory businesses don't start charging fees until their success. And even the ones that do start charging fees, they have to charge such a low fee up front to get the work a lot of the time. They're like lost leaders. So everyone's kind of like, eating baked beans on toast until someone succeeds.
Or I see it also where people will say it's dollar driven from the start, so everything goes out to tender, and tender has its obvious benefits.
Yeah.
But how often do you see something comes in and someone says, I think it's worth this? Well, how can you say that when you have two tenders that are, within $15,000 of each other? How did you come up with that number? And so that's part of the process. So if you're trying to screw over that person based on what you think, well, what happened to those 5 or 6 roles that you were just talking about? You haven't done any due diligence whatsoever, where you haven't gone and made that investment into attending seminars, like you said, networking. You can cold call, but that kind of only gets you so far. And that's where relationships come into the mix and the community. And if there's one thing I've learnt through my work and Build Hatch is having that access and resource to people who know people.
Yes.
Who know more people.
It's got the degrees of separation. Firstly, you come in humble. The developers that come in shiny, glitzy, glammy. And I'm not saying don't look after yourself, don't drive a nice car, whatever, but it's not an industry where you fake it till you make it.
Sure.
It's the opposite. And you look at the guys that are really doing well, there's some suave ones out there and they match their different markets. A lot of them you wouldn't know. But they are balanced individuals. Some of them are a bit grumpy. And I think they're grumpy because they've been worn down by the planning system. Like there's 3 types of risk in a construction or development. You've got construction risk, which is what we're here to talk about, Build Hatch, right? You've got the planning risk, which is all the bodies and the 36 layers of planning you've got with depth in each of them. Environmental, ecological, timing, local community, state environmental planning instruments, stuff like that. And then you've got the sales risk. Like they're the big 3 categories of risk. And then within the construction, I'm not going to tell a builder what the risks are, but we talk about the big 4 with the structural, with the thermal, with the sound and with the water. And they're things that obviously that the big developments, like that ruins the resale value of them forever. They don't even settle all the time. But if I'm a builder or a developer and I really want to make sure I build my power team from the start, I want to be engaging with people about the sector I want to be in, hearing what they need to see from me and when they need the engagement, how I can add value to them and cross-check things. Because the town planner will ring the architect. The architect will ring the surveyor. The surveyor will ring the real estate agent and say, well, what's this land worth if I cut it off? Then they'll go back to someone they know at council. Then they'll make a call to someone that's worked with something similar in UAE in another area. Then they'll talk to the agent and say, well, if I do this, what will this do to the product? And if I go for this product mix, what do you think? Then they talk to the marketing company and go, well, if I'm going to do this, how much does this cost? And they talk to the financier and go, well, how many sales do I need to do this? And do I need mezzanine top up? What rates are you doing at the moment? How hard is it to get it? Now, this is all before the site's acquired. You can't do that without a network. And if you don't know the person, you need to know the person that knows the person. That happens from these groups. And these groups have a voice. So the UDIA in particular, now Property Council Australia is great too. I think Property Council are very media savvy. And I think they put on some great speakers and they have some great events and great awards and all that stuff. And they're fantastic as well. I think with UDIA, it's almost like you're catching up for a lunch or a seminar with people that you know that are genuinely trying to help each other and help the system change. And I think PCA's done very well on that, advocating for change, lobbying. I think Property Council Australia, that is. The UDIA does a great job of it as well. They know the councils, they know the state, they understand where the different levers are you can pull. So the role of an agent to a builder, it's an integral relationship. And I'm not saying this because you introduced me as a real estate agent, for example. Yeah, many of the businesses I own are in the real estate sector. I'm not personally trying to get a real estate job off this. If I got a referral off this, I'd make sure you got the right person in the right area that's going to do the work. I don't go to most of those meetings now because there is someone better to do it. I've got the system that works. Or I put you in touch with someone even if they're not in my brand. But what I realised very early is that the agent is actually one person in the centre of it. They're not the centre, but they're in and around that core group.
They are.
They can talk to every single stakeholder. Both sides of the deal. A property owner that isn't even engaged by someone, they can talk to surveyors, council, they can talk to financiers, they can talk to builders, architects, and the advice that they're giving, it's the most human IP driven advice, probably out of the whole spectrum when you think about it. As long as they know the shit, because the builder, the job can go ahead or not go ahead based on the build cost, but unfortunately the builder gives their actual final advice well after it's been bought. The agent's giving it earlier.
In that example, you're there from before the site's acquired, ideally, all the way to the end. Yeah. So you're the guy there holding the hand the whole way through. You get to see. So what you're saying there is you could have a builder who he may only be motivated or focused on his 12 or 18 month build process, what he needs to make from that, and then he's out. Whereas what you're saying is that long-term benefit, and not only just, I guess, from a transactional sense, but also moving forward to the next one and then the next one.
Yeah.
How many of your relationships go on multi-generational now?
Definitely. You're one of them. We're not doing a job together right now, but I'm pretty confident if something was going on, you'd call me and I'd put you on with someone in my firm or I'd give you a quick IP on the phone.
Sure.
Or I'd connect you with someone. But, I've got developers that have got $1.5 billion worth of work underway right now, as in builders. And I won't mention their name just because they're a pretty under-the-radar character, but, this person that I know, they've got a very good building company and they develop as well. And their philosophy is keep the team together until someone F's up, right? I haven't been swearing much on this one, so I'll keep it out. But keep the team together until someone F's up. And it's it sounds really rough and ready, but it's actually not, because they chose the team based on trust, relationship, value add from the start. So many of those deals are done at the start on a handshake, and this is probably part 2 of that conversation about keeping the tribe together, because there's a lot of shit real estate agents out there. Make no mistake. I'm not saying the whole category, paint them with a brush and they're angels. Same with builders, same with developers, same with
every industry.
Every industry, right? So if you can find it, and it's not just credible by reputation, it's if your vibe attracts your tribe. If they're providing value and you can see it, you can hear the IP oozing out of them, and they're giving so much away from the start, and they don't get the fee until the end. If you handshake with someone and say, if I buy this site off you, I'm giving you the work back, the most cardinal rule in real estate, commercial in particular, if you don't get that work back, you might get away with it just then, but that's going to get around quick. And the next deal you go and do to buy off someone, you're second in line. You don't even realise it. Someone else has called another buyer that will honour their word. And the best developers I've seen nationally, internationally, they meet someone, they say, if you help me make this deal happen, whether it's a buyer's agent or a vendor's agent that's disclosing it fully to the vendor, or someone that's not even in the deal but they're giving him advice, if they say you're on this job, it could be 5 years away before they're selling that job, but they get the work. And the best ones I know, they actually will make sure if they sell that site, they make it part of the deal that agent gets the work, gets on the work. Consultants, architects, engineers, builders. like a builder, I think, is a great JV partner for a developer. Because, like, it's sort of that, you got a bit of each other's blood, you got skin in the game.
I see it. And from my line of work on the other side of the fence, that's exactly where long-term relationships and if you have a short-term view, or you see a small issue and it becomes a big issue, you should be really questioning that. In the scheme of things, is this going to be a huge problem?
Yeah.
If you can resolve it without too many headaches and you can manage it, mate, flag it to them. But if you can just manage it, even if you have to swallow that, the long-term effect that has on the relationship moving forward far outweighs the short-term view.
I think so, for sure. And I went through this today when I was running a leadership session, and it was helping people understand what sort of roles that they're going to play in a business, and then helping people understand with their clients how they can get them speaking their truth. And it's sort of like there's sort of three categories in this particular one. There's things that they must have in the arrangement, there's things they want to have, and there's things that they won't have. And it's sort of like that in your role. Like, I won't do these jobs. I'm willing to do these jobs for a short while, but not forever. I'm good at these and I like these, and these ones make my heart sing. Now, I'll take heart out of it for the sake of just keeping it really black and white. Like, things that you want in the relationship, an agent might say, I really like payment terms that do this. And the builder might say, well, I prefer to work on a cost-plus basis rather than a fixed price contract or whatever. They might say, well, I must have this. Okay, well, I must have transparency over the books, or I must have my quotes back in this period of time. Or if I'm going to go and look at something before it goes on the market, I must have one of your lead pricing experts look at within 30 days because I buy everything on due diligence periods. And then there's the thing I won't have. Like, I know builders that will not do a hard dollar tender because their company is not set up for hard dollar tender. They'll do a cost plus and the margin will be lean, really lean, and they will add value on that annuity work that they get over and over again, like it's good construction design, where they take it, they make it more beautiful, they get rid of inefficiencies in stairwells and car parks and how they come out of the ground and balcony trimmings and, whether they're using precast or not. And they look at things that are going to make that building mature well over time, by using natural concrete instead of using painted panel, for example, things like that. Now, when they say I won't hard dollar tender, and I ask them, why won't they hard dollar tender? They talk about, now the particular builder I'm talking to is just on the border of tier 2 and tier 1. So you can sort of count the tier 1s on a couple of hands in Australia.
Correct.
And on the tier 2, there's not heaps of them either. So you can imagine the book of work that they've got and where it sits and how many staff they've got. I said, why won't you do hard dollar tender? And they said, well, there's a lot of the big builders, and let's say tier 2 and tier 1, they've got whole tender departments. Now those tender departments aren't to put together a glossy proposal. They're there to go through the tender document and find the weak links in the tender document. They are going to pitch as lean as they can on the items that they can't move on, and then they're going to find sections where they can throw in varies later to make their margin back up. And the late
also
delay...
known as a shopping list.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And then the late delay penalties that kick in later. You hear about these massive firms losing $10 million on a project, and you're like, how the hell are they still in business, But they're still in business because they've made up so many licks along the way with these varies that don't look like their fault. So a builder that's going up against that hasn't put a tender team in place that might cost them $1.5 million a year in wages, is saying, I'm not going to do that. I want a relationship where I'm asked to put equity in the job, or I am the one coming in and I'm working with a partner, or I'm coming in like I'm a partner and here's my booked in margin. You can see the books. And if you want to go and get a tender just to see where they started, make sure that you haven't left any links in your tender document so that you do get a proper price. And then I'll show you how I'll take a couple of mil off that price. But you'll get that couple of mil for free, because that's our relationship. But
that's that small investment.
It is, yeah. And I've seen great variations of that where someone's gone, look, I'll do the construction design for you. It's going to cost you a good chunk, so you're going to want to go with this. And if you go and get a tender document done, you'll see straight away where that would have blown out. So they're almost spending a little bit of the hurt money up front to get their evidence that they need. Because there's a lot of pressure put on middle management. Like, you've got these sort of project managers, development managers, they're making huge decisions on behalf of tens and tens of $1 million companies. And how are they doing it? Is it a relationship? Is it a document? Is it a spreadsheet? Are they even good with numbers? Are they just telling the boss they are? A lot of the millionaires and billionaires and deca-millionaires and stuff that run these development companies, they're not actually numbers savvy. They've gotten ahead through their drive and determination, but then they're empowering people that have maybe only worked in organisations at a level where the buck doesn't stop with them. And those people are making really big decisions. So I think coming back to this, what's the message out of it? And I said at the start, what's our intention here? The intention is, I suppose, if you can assemble a tribe at your start with trusting open communicators that are all getting their needs on the table. I heard this from Tom Billieu, and he's got a podcast, and it's about Question Nutrition. And they're a business that became a $1 billion company, and he's got a lot of people that have started nutrition brands after they've left in competition to him. And he said, I'm fine with that. As long as you declare it up front that when you come to work with me, you're going to learn to get as good as you can, and then you're going to go and compete with me. So he said, put all of your, Louis Howes it was, and Tom Billieu, put all of your selfish desires up front. I call it selfish desires, so it's so obvious it's not just what you want out of it, because when you say, what do you want, it's often what you think the other person wants to hear. When you say selfish desires, what you're doing is you're putting down what you really want. So if I put that down and you put yours down and we can work with that, and it even sounds like a good idea, that's a powerful relationship.
It is.
If you're withholding though at the start, that's going to carry through, but what happens is it's like the butterfly effect. You withhold a bit of information from each other. I can only afford to pay this for the site, or I can only afford to do it for this. And you withhold, and then it just starts echoing, and then you get through the job, and these bloody things are sailing, and it's just going to end up cataclysmically wrong. And unfortunately, at this end of the game, you don't get that many opportunities for error. You might stuff up one development and survive it. You're not going to stuff up multiple.
Nah, there's not a lot of room at all for margin. So people listening to this who want to reach out or get into contact with you, I recommend you're well known as MK, but Mark Kentwell.
Yeah, probably, I suppose of the public channels, social media, Instagram's probably the easiest way to get me, because I personally reply to the messages. It's at Mark Kentwell PRD. PRD stands for Projects Research Development, by the way. They changed it to Property Research Development when they acquired a residential brand. So Mark Kentwell PRD, that's the easiest. Like, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on all those. I've got websites, but that's where I respond personally. You can get access to my other businesses there and stuff like that. But I'm happy to contribute. I'm happy to pay it forward. I've definitely been in a lot of different worlds, and I still am. I'm still in development. I still have construction jobs on at any given time that I'm paying the bills on. I'm still working with architects all the time. I'm still working with my agents in putting sites together. I still actively invest in venture capital and stuff like that, and I'm involved in scaling businesses. So, and I don't say all that to impress anyone. It's more from the point of view that I like looking at things from a different distance and saying, if I was hearing this, what are the things that I could get from this to be better at my craft so that everyone's winning? Because I'm all into win-win. And I think for builders, there's so much out there for you. If you're good at your craft and you're that freelancer, you can delegate just about everything that's not your craft. And it starts with having a good tribe around you that are going to just give you those first couple of jobs where you can prove yourself and the evidence is happening on the job. So that's where you get the media guys involved, you get the social involved. You start taking care of your work pipeline. You can be a lot clearer about the kind of work you want to do and who you want to work with, and then your brand gets stronger because you're more who you are. And I talk about be, do, have. If you be the person you want to be, then you'll be doing the things that that person does, and you'll have anything you want. Authenticity up front, relationships, and those handshake arrangements, I think they carry a long way.
Yeah, look, I love it. And I think you mentioned tribe many times, and I love that word. And particularly, I think you don't need to be extremely wealthy or have access to a lot of resources. You can make those opportunities yourself. You can knock those doors down yourself and just build that up over time. And all of a sudden, you know, in the space of 12 months, maybe even less, 6 months, by doing that networking without sort of outlaying money for all the extra staff, things like that, if you can just break it down into systems like you've mentioned, your business can go a long way and all of a sudden put you out in front. If
you can get involved in one big job with a team that you're vibing with them, and you might know them socially through the work you've done on networking. If you can get involved in a big job and you can be a tiny percentage of that job and you just be open with them. My selfish desire is to see what this looks like from the inside, and I'm willing to put real capital in, and I'm not going to be a voting shareholder. I'll be units in the trust, and I will sit there and I'll watch as long as you let me in on everything that's going on. And I'll be a value to you at some point throughout. I don't know how it's going to be, but I'm willing to, and I'm willing to put cash in for it.
Putting your hand up, saying I'm here as a resource.
I'm here, and you know, you might connect them with someone. You might be a pair of legs when they need one. They might have someone that drops off the perch. You might help to just come up and help them out through a tough period. You put $100,000 into a development job that's got millions in the figure, where you're insignificant in the scheme of things in units, but the learnings you'll get from that, you'll come out the back of it like you are that developer.
Absolutely. All right, MK, before we leave, I just want to thank you for showing me around this wonderful property.
Yes.
I think the terrace here is amazing. So we'll put this up on our socials so people can see, but it's probably the biggest outdoor entertaining terrace I've ever seen in an apartment before.
Yeah. Look, I'd really like to make sure that when this gets onto the video side that we do have a description of it. So we're in East End here. This is stage 1, designed by SJB Architects, built by Richard Crooks. The developer is Iris Capital. So Sam Arnu, the CEO of Iris Capital, he is a guy that is one of the absolute best at not value engineering. So like these have stood up to exactly every render that we've had. They've come in as good or better than the finishes that were prescribed, right down to the sort of the terrazzo marble in the entry foyers, even the work they've done on each floor, the terrazzo marble on the outside of the lifts, where that would usually just be gyprock. The absolute standards that they've carried in through the kitchens and the finishings and the facade bricks. I've watched him walk through and have walls repainted 3 times because, the hue isn't quite right, or you can see brush strokes. And Richard Crooks have been excellent at doing it. I must admit, I've seen them on a number of jobs before, but I hadn't seen them to this level of detail with someone pushing them this hard. And the outcomes are spectacular. This is a 3-bedder here. This is sort of circa 2.5, 2.75 million.
So this is on the market right now?
Just coming on the market now. So we're sort of, we've set the record in this development off the plan for apartments. We're over 20 grand a metre in Newcastle in these apartments. There's some views on offer, but mostly it's about the way they're done, the feel of it, the look of it, the on-site offering. There's a Woolworths Metro downstairs. So yeah, check it out, Stage 1 East End, if you want to go and check out some good construction finishes.
Yeah, look, it's amazing. And like I said, we'll put the links up on the show notes. So
yep.
MK, thanks for coming on to Build H. It's been wonderful to sit down and have a chat. There's always things we learn, even just by sitting down and having a chat. It's amazing, all the different things that I didn't know as well. So we've known each other a long time. So
mate, it's my pleasure. And yeah, thanks for doing what you're doing. Keep singing the song.
All right, thanks, mate. Well, that was another Build Hatch episode with Mark Kentwell from PRD Real Estate. As you could tell from our chat, Mark is a very energetic and enthusiastic person about his people and his career. As usual, please check out our Instagram and other socials where you'll be able to learn more about our guests and some of the features of the work that we talk about. Have a great week, and as always, you'll hear me again on the airwaves next week. Thanks for listening to another episode of Build Hatch.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.